Once upon a time, in a city where people walked past each other without looking twice, there lived a woman named Reina. She was not like other women. Her arms were thick with muscle, her shoulders wide like a fighter's, and her back strong enough to carry refrigerators. People whispered when she walked by. Some stared. Some laughed behind her back. But Reina didn't care. She had no home, not even a room to call her own. Her van was her bed, her kitchen, her closet, and the world was her hallway. She worked as a delivery woman for a small local company that paid little and expected a lot. Rain or shine, she showed up. She never called in sick. She never asked for more. At 5:30 every morning, she washed her face in the gas station bathroom, tied her long black hair into a bun, and put on her brown delivery uniform. It didn't fit her well. It was always too tight around her arms and too loose at the waist, but she wore it anyway, because to Reina, work was dignity. Even if you were sleeping in the back of a van with the sound of traffic as your lullaby. That morning, the rain came hard. The sky was gray, and the streets were already filling with puddles. Reina climbed into her van and checked the route on her cracked phone screen. 34 deliveries. All over the city. Heavy boxes. Long stairs. No elevators. She blew warm breath into her hands and muttered, "Let's go, Queen," the name she used to encourage herself. Her first stop was an old apartment building downtown. No elevator. She lifted 2 big boxes of books and carried them up 5 flights without a break. When the man at the door opened it and saw her, his eyes went wide. "You carried both of those? Alone?" Reina wiped sweat from her forehead and nodded. "That's the job." He gave her a small tip. She thanked him, smiled, and walked back down. Her knees ached, but she never let pain slow her down. By noon, she had finished half her list. She ate a banana and a boiled egg in her van and drank from a warm water bottle. Then back to work. No rest, no time. She delivered furniture to a small office. The manager came out and called 2 men to help. "I got it," Reina said. The men laughed. "Sure." One said, "You and which crane?" But Reina bent her knees, lifted the desk, and carried it alone. Everyone stared. "Whoa!" The manager whispered, mouth open, but Reina didn't smile. She just set the desk down gently and said, "Where do you want it?" That was her life. Strength was her voice. Muscles were her armor. But inside, she carried something heavier than all the boxes in the world. Silence. No family. No lover. No friend who knew where she slept. Every day she delivered things to people who had homes, warmth, and comfort. And every night, she returned to her cold van with a sore back and quiet tears. That night it rained harder than before. Her usual parking spot near the warehouse was flooded, so she drove around, looking for a dry place. After 30 minutes, she found a fancy neighborhood with wide streets and quiet corners. Big houses, gates, tall trees, expensive lights. She pulled into a side road near a mansion, turned off her headlights, and parked under a tree. She leaned back in the driver's seat, covered herself with her jacket, and tried to sleep. A dog barked in the distance. The rain tapped on the roof like tiny fingers. And Reina whispered, "Just one more night." The next morning, she woke up to the sound of birds. Her neck hurt, her back was stiff, but the rain had stopped. She stretched her arms, looked in the mirror, and fixed her hair. "Still standing," she said to herself. Today's first delivery was to a place called Kingsley Estate. She didn't know what it was. The system just said, "Gate 3, Silver Pine Street." She drove up the hill, turned left, and saw it. The mansion was huge, glass walls, sharp lines, gardens trimmed like a painting. The gate was tall and black, with gold lions on each side. Reina drove up slowly. The guard walked over with a scowl. "Delivery," he said. "Yes, sir," Reina replied, handing him the tablet. "Box for Mr. Kingsley. Leave it at the gate. I need a signature." "No one signs. Just leave it." Reina stood tall. "Sir, the system says, hand to recipient only. That means someone inside must sign." The guard frowned. "Do you think you can just walk in here with those arms and make rules?" I don't make rules. I follow them. He stared at her muscles, clearly annoyed. Wait here. He walked into the booth and picked up the phone. Inside the mansion, a man in a wheelchair sat by the window, watching it all happen. Julian Kingsley. He was 38, rich beyond imagination, handsome but tired. His legs didn't move like they used to. Car accident had changed his life. He rarely saw people, but today something made him pause. He looked through the glass and saw Raina standing in the rain. Her posture strong, her arms folded, her jaw tight. She's different, he muttered. The intercom buzzed. Sir, delivery. Wants signature. Julian pressed the button. Let her in. The guard blinked. But I said let her in. The gate opened slowly. Raina walked in, holding the heavy box with ease. Julian watched from the shadows behind the curtains. When she reached the door, a housekeeper opened it and signed. Raina nodded, turned, and walked back to the van. Julian leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the glass. For the first time in months, he whispered something out loud. Who is she? And Raina, back in her van, whispered something too. Rich people are weird. She didn't know that this delivery was just the beginning. Tomorrow she'd be back, and nothing would ever be the same. The next morning came too fast. Raina was already up before the sun. She had barely slept. Her van was damp from the rain, and her shoulders ached from staying in one position all night. She opened the door and stepped out, cracking her neck from side to side. Her boots hit the wet pavement, and her breath floated in the cold air. She rubbed her arms and looked around. Same quiet neighborhood, same perfect lawns, same feeling like she didn't belong. Still, she had a job to do. She grabbed her small towel, stepped into the gas station nearby, washed her face quickly, and tied her hair up again. No makeup, no earrings, just Raina. Strong, simple, tired. She checked her route. Something made her pause. Kingsley Estate, Gate 3, Silver Pine Street. Again, she blinked at the screen. Was it a mistake? No way, she muttered. Didn't I just deliver there yesterday? She looked closer. Different package, different sender, same recipient. Julian Kingsley. Her chest tightened. She didn't know why. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a weird coincidence. Or maybe, stop it, she told herself. Just another house, another gate. Still, her hands felt warm as she started the engine. As she approached the estate again, the gold lions on the gate seemed to stare at her. She pulled the van to a stop and walked out, cradling a long rectangular box. Not too heavy, but bulky. She set it gently on the ground and walked toward the guard booth. Same guard, same scowl. She kept her voice even. Delivery for Mr. Kingsley. He glanced up, already annoyed. Again? He asked. That's what the system says. He narrowed his eyes. You sure you're not stalking the man? Raina frowned. Excuse me? First yesterday, now again. What's next? Candlelight dinner. She crossed her arms slowly. Look, I'm just doing my job. If your boss doesn't want deliveries, tell him to stop ordering things. The guard leaned forward. Don't get smart with me, muscle woman. Raina didn't flinch. Don't get rude with me, man behind glass. For a moment there was silence. Then the guard huffed, picked up the phone, and called inside. Inside the glass mansion, Julian sat at his grand piano. He wasn't playing. He just stared at the keys. His wheelchair was parked next to the bench, and the early sunlight painted gold across the marble floors. The intercom buzzed. Sir, the delivery woman is back. Again. Julian tilted his head. Same one. Yes. A small smile touched his lips. Let her in. The guard's voice came through again, clearly unsure. You're sure? Let her in. The gate buzzed open. Raina picked up the box, her arms tight around it. As she stepped through, the guard called after her. Careful not to scratch the glass with your sweat. She didn't answer, but her face burned. She walked through the long driveway. Her boots crushed the gravel softly. Trees lined both sides, trimmed and perfect. She felt like a giant walking into a world that didn't want her. She reached the tall glass door. Before she could knock, it opened. The same housekeeper stood there, eyes wide. "You again," she said. "Package for Mr. Kingsley. Needs a signature." The housekeeper glanced over her shoulder, as if someone was watching. "I'll sign." Raina hesitated. "I was told." A voice echoed from deep inside. "Let her bring it in." Julian's voice. Clear, calm, firm. The housekeeper blinked, then stepped aside. Raina paused for a second, then stepped into the mansion. The air inside was quiet, cold. Everything was glass, marble, and silence. Raina's boots felt too loud for this place. She walked slowly, carrying the box, eyes scanning the wide hallway. On the left, she saw a staircase. On the right, a wide-open living room with white couches and tall ceilings. And straight ahead, a man in a wheelchair. He sat near the window, light pouring over him. His back was straight, his face calm, sharp jaw, soft eyes. He wore a simple black sweater and dark pants. But there was something heavy in the way he held his hands. Raina swallowed and kept walking. Julian didn't move. He just watched. She placed the box gently on the nearby table, then straightened her back. "Delivery for Mr. Kingsley," she said. He nodded. "That would be me." She blinked. "You? I know. I look like someone who never lifts a finger." She didn't answer. He smiled. "Thank you for coming." "Twice." She shrugged. "Wasn't my choice. I asked for you." Raina frowned. "Why?" Julian leaned forward slightly. "Because I wanted to see you again." The words felt strange in the air. Raina blinked. "I'm just a delivery person, sir." "You're not just anything." She stood silent, then looked away. Julian continued. "What's your name?" "Raina." "Raina," he repeated softly. "That means queen." "So they say." He tilted his head. "Do you mind if I ask? Do you always carry heavy packages alone?" "Yes." "No help? No need?" He looked impressed. "You carried a whole desk yesterday." "I remember." "And you didn't break a sweat." "I did. You just didn't see it." He smiled. She didn't. Julian nodded. "Would you like some water?" "I'm fine." "Tea?" "No." "A chair?" "No." He paused. "Are you always this guarded?" She looked at him now, straight in the eyes. "Are you always this nosy?" His smile grew wider. "Fair." For a moment, the room was quiet. Just the sound of a clock ticking somewhere far away. Julian broke the silence. "You sleep in your van." Raina froze. "What did you say?" "I noticed. Yesterday. After you left. I saw the way you looked around before driving off. You parked under the tree for too long." She clenched her jaw. "That's not your business." "I didn't mean to offend." "You did." Julian nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Raina turned toward the door. "I should go." But before she could take a step, he spoke again. "You don't have to live like that." She turned back. "And what would you know about it?" He held her gaze. "More than you think." There was something behind his words. Something deep. Something broken. Raina looked at him again. Really looked. His legs were still. His hands rested gently. But his eyes were tired. Not from sleep, but from life. She stepped forward, slowly. "What happened to you?" "A car crash. A year ago. Drunk driver. I was on the way to the airport." "Lost your legs." "Lost control. They work. Sometimes. But not enough. Not anymore." Raina nodded. "I'm sorry," Julian whispered. "I didn't invite you in to make you feel small." Raina sighed. "Then why did you?" He thought for a second, then said the truth. "Because you reminded me of something I forgot. Strength." Raina didn't speak. Julian continued. "People talk a lot in this house, but no one listens. No one lifts. No one bends. No one pushes. You walked through the rain like it was nothing. You faced my angry guard like he was air. You didn't even flinch." She looked down. "That's just how I survive." "Maybe, but it's rare." "And I noticed." Raina lifted her eyes. "Well, thanks." But I'm not looking to be noticed. Julian gave a sad smile. Neither was I. She stood there, unsure of what to say. He pointed toward the box. Do you want to know what's in it? Not really. It's a telescope. Raina raised a brow. I like to look at the stars, he said. It helps me breathe. She softened a little. I haven't looked at stars in years. Why not? No roof. Julian nodded. You can come back and use mine. Anytime. She scoffed. Right? Me in this mansion? With your guards? I don't think so. I'll tell them to stand down. She stepped back again. Look, this was weird enough already. I just deliver things. That's all. He wheeled forward slightly. Maybe next time I'll order something else. So I can see you again. She stared at him. That's not how this works. Maybe it should be. Raina turned again. Goodbye, Mr. Kingsley. Julian, he said softly. She hesitated, then walked out the door without another word. Outside, the guard watched her leave. He opened the gate without saying anything, but Raina noticed his eyes. Less mockery, more curiosity. She didn't like it. She didn't like being seen. She threw the van into gear and drove off without looking back. But her heart was pounding. Back inside, Julian sat at the window. He watched her van disappear. The housekeeper entered quietly. You called for her again? Julian didn't answer. Sir, people will talk. Let them. The housekeeper tilted her head. Is this wise? Julian looked out the glass. She's the only real thing I've seen in a long time. The next morning started slower than usual. Julian Kingsley wasn't rushing to meetings. He wasn't reading reports. He wasn't hosting guests. He was sitting by the window again, staring at the empty driveway. He had been like that for an hour. His hand rested on the side of his wheelchair. His legs, still and lifeless, were covered with a thick blanket. He wore a dark gray sweater and black joggers. But he wasn't cold. He was just still. His eyes didn't blink much. His thoughts were stuck in yesterday. The delivery woman, Raina. Her name repeated in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. He had met all kinds of women in his life. Models, CEOs, actresses, women who smiled too fast, talked too much, or cared too little. But Raina was different. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't stare at his legs. She didn't even smile. And yet, Julian couldn't stop thinking about her. He turned his head and looked at the telescope in the box, still unopened. He had ordered it as a gift to himself. But now it felt like something more, like a symbol, like maybe he needed to see the stars again. But something else bothered him. She looked tired yesterday. Her eyes weren't just heavy. They were hiding something. A life of carrying too much. He tapped the button on the armrest of his chair. The screen on the wall came alive. Call Benedict, he said. In seconds, the screen showed an older man in a neat suit. His personal assistant. Good morning, sir. Morning, Julian replied. I need a favor. Yes. Can you call the delivery company I used yesterday? Of course. Request the same delivery person again. There was a pause. You want to send another package, sir? No. Just tell them I forgot to sign something. Make something up. Benedict didn't ask questions. He never did. I'll handle it. Julian leaned back in his chair. He didn't know what he was doing. But he knew what he wasn't doing anymore. Hiding. Raina was sitting in the van, eating a hard piece of bread and sipping lukewarm water. She had just finished lifting a mini fridge to the third floor of a cheap hotel when her work phone buzzed. New route. New name. She tapped the screen and stared. Kingsley Estate. Gate 3. Again. She blinked. Nope, she said out loud. This has to be a mistake. She checked the request. Same address. Same gate. Different code. Different barcode. Same name. Julian Kingsley. Her heart beat faster, but she didn't know why. Maybe it was anger. Maybe confusion. Maybe curiosity. She tossed the last bit of bread aside and started the engine. When she reached the gate, the same guard was there. But this time, something was different. He didn't scowl. He didn't smirk. He just opened the gate. Without a word. Raina slowly drove in, confused. She parked beside the long curved path. The mansion loomed ahead, beautiful and cold. The front door opened before she could knock. The housekeeper stood there with a soft nod. "Mr. Kingsley is waiting for you inside," she said. Raina frowned. "I'm just here to drop something off. I didn't even bring a box." "I know," the woman said. "He requested your visit." "For what?" The woman stepped aside. Raina hesitated, then walked in. Julian was in the sunroom this time. Warm light filled the space. Glass walls surrounded him. Plants hung in white pots above. He turned his chair toward her when she entered. "Raina," he said, almost like a greeting he'd been waiting to say all morning. "You called for me?" she asked, arms crossed. "I did." "Why?" "I forgot to thank you." Her eyebrows rose. "You had to call my company, lie about a package, and pull me off my route. To say thank you?" Julian looked slightly embarrassed. "Okay, that's not the only reason. I figured. I wanted to talk." Raina shook her head. "You have people to talk to. Drivers, assistants, housekeepers, doctors, therapists. But none of them stare me in the face like I'm just another man." Raina didn't respond. Julian's voice dropped lower. "And none of them are you." Silence. She took a step closer. "Julian, what do you want?" He looked at her slowly. "I want to understand you." "There's nothing to understand. I'm a delivery woman. I lift boxes. I sleep in a van. I keep to myself." "But why?" Raina stared at him. "That's personal. I can keep a secret." She hesitated. Julian added gently, "Do you always sleep in your van?" Raina's jaw tightened. "Where else should I sleep?" "I could." "No." She cut him off. "Don't offer anything. Don't throw money at me. Don't try to fix me. I wasn't trying to." "Yes, you were." Julian sighed. I see how hard you work. And I don't need saving." "I didn't say you did." "You think this is some story? Some rich guy finds a poor woman and gives her a new life? Is that what this is?" "No, because that's not real. That's a movie. Real life doesn't care if you're strong. It doesn't care if you're kind. It just beats you down until you don't stand up again." Julian was quiet. Then he whispered, "That's what I thought too." Raina blinked. "What?" "I thought life beat me. The day I woke up in a hospital bed and couldn't feel my legs. I thought it was over." She softened a little. "But you're still here." "Barely. I shut the world out. I pushed everyone away. I lived in silence. Until you carried a box through my gate like it was nothing. And you didn't flinch when I told you my legs don't work. You didn't look sad. You didn't look afraid. Because I've seen worse." "I know you have." Raina looked away. Julian rolled his chair forward slightly. "Just talk to me. Not as a billionaire. Not as a boss. Just a man. Talking to a woman who clearly carries more than anyone knows." She looked down at her hands. Rough, strong, but shaking just a little. "I used to have a gym," she said finally. "Tiny one. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. I trained women. Helped them get strong. Helped them feel safe." Julian listened closely. One night, a pipe burst. Flooded the place. Insurance didn't cover it. Couldn't pay rent. Lost the gym. Then the apartment. Then everything. She didn't blink. Her eyes were locked on a plant near the window. "I've been sleeping in that van for a year now. Nobody knows. I don't tell people. I just deliver and move on." Julian asked, "Why didn't you get help?" "I did. People smiled. Said nice things. Then closed their doors." He was quiet. Then softly said, "I'm sorry." Raina's voice cracked slightly. "Don't feel sorry for me. I don't. I feel respect." She looked at him. Really looked. And for once, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked tired, human, and maybe even kind. They sat in silence for a while. No more sharp words. Just quiet. Julian broke it gently. "Do you want to see the stars tonight?" Raina gave him a sideways glance. "Stars." I finally opened the telescope. It works. She tilted her head. From this room, the roof opens. She raised a brow. Seriously? He smiled. I don't lie about stars. She chuckled under her breath. The sound surprised them both. I can't stay long, she said. I'm not asking you to. She sighed. I've got 5 more deliveries today. Julian nodded. Come back tonight then, after you're done. Raina frowned. That's not how this works. Maybe it's how this starts. She studied him. The calm in his voice. The hope in his eyes. It made her chest feel warm and strange. Finally, she said, I'll think about it. That's fair. Raina turned to leave. But before she reached the door, Julian called out, Raina! She stopped. What do you eat for dinner? She smiled for the first time. Whatever's cheap. He smiled back. I'll try to beat that. That night, Raina didn't go to her usual parking lot. She drove instead to a quiet corner under the hill near Silver Pine Street. She didn't know if she'd go up again. She didn't know what this was becoming. But for the first time in a year, she wasn't just surviving. She was curious. About the stars. About the man behind the glass. And maybe, just maybe, about herself again. The sky was dark and clear that night. For the first time in weeks, there was no rain. No clouds. Just stars, spread wide like tiny sparks across the deep black sky. The kind of sky that made people stop and look up, even if just for a moment. Raina sat in her van, parked quietly beneath the hill near Kingsley Estate. The engine was off. The lights were off. But her thoughts were loud. She had finished all her deliveries. Her back hurt. Her arms were sore. Her shirt had a stain from spilled sauce she couldn't afford to waste. She should have been sleeping. She should have been resting. But she wasn't. She kept glancing at her phone. There were no texts, no missed calls. No one ever called her anyway. But her mind kept whispering his name. Julian. The man in the chair. The glass mansion. The man who had asked her to come back tonight to see the stars. She had told herself she wouldn't go. She didn't belong in places like that. Not in homes with white floors and gold gates. Not with men who wore sweaters that probably cost more than everything she owned. But he didn't talk to her like a billionaire. And she didn't talk to him like a homeless woman. They had just talked. Like two people. It had been a long time since she'd felt that. She looked up at the hill again. The mansion lights were still on. And before she could stop herself, she opened the door. The guard was gone tonight. The gate was open. Raina walked in slowly, her hands in the pockets of her jacket. Her steps were heavy but quiet. The air smelled like flowers and cold stone. As she reached the front door, it opened before she could knock. Julian was waiting. He sat in his chair, dressed in a plain navy shirt and dark pants. No guards. No assistants. Just him. A small smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. I thought you changed your mind, he said. I almost did, she replied. What changed? She shrugged. I looked up. He smiled and turned his chair. Come. The roof's already open. The sunroom had transformed. The ceiling had pulled back, revealing the sky. The stars were everywhere above them, like they had been waiting all day for this moment. In the center of the room stood the telescope. Raina walked in slowly, glancing around. The plants above moved slightly with the breeze. The marble under her boots felt cold, but her chest was warm. Julian rolled to the side and nodded at the telescope. Have you ever looked through one? Once. A long time ago. At a museum, she said. I barely remember. He pointed. Try it. She stepped forward, leaned in, and peered through. She let out a small breath. Wow! Julian watched her face. The way her eyes lit up. The way her lips parted slightly. What do you see? He asked. A bunch of stars. Anything else? She focused. Cluster? They look like diamonds. They're called the Pleiades. Sounds fancy. He chuckled. Some call them the Seven Sisters. They're about 400 light years away. She blinked and looked up. So the light we're seeing now left that spot a long time ago? Exactly. That's crazy. It is. She stepped back and crossed her arms. You stare at stars often? Julian nodded. It helps me remember how small I am, and how big the world still is, even if I'm stuck in one room. She looked at him. You're not stuck. He raised a brow. No. She shook her head. You just stopped moving. That hit him harder than he expected. He didn't say anything, so she sat down on the edge of the couch nearby. The silence was comfortable now. Not sharp, not strange, just quiet. Then she asked, why did you stop talking to people? He leaned back slowly. Because they stopped seeing me. She frowned. After the accident, he continued, people didn't know how to act around me. Some were overly nice. Some avoided me. Some just treated me like I was glass. Fragile. Breakable. You don't seem breakable to me. I'm not. But I let them think I was. She tilted her head. Why? Julian stared up at the stars. Because it was easier. Easier to hide. To stay in this house. To stop feeling anything. She nodded. I get that. Do you? She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Every night when I park my van, I tell myself I'll try again tomorrow. But I'm not sure what I'm even trying for anymore. I just keep going. Julian turned to face her. Isn't that strength? No. It's survival. Still counts. She looked at him. You ever wish you could just disappear? He answered without thinking. Every day. She nodded slowly. Me too. They both fell silent again. But this time it wasn't lonely. It was shared. Julian broke the quiet. What was it like? Running your gym? Raina's eyes lit up for a second. It was the best thing I ever did. Not because it made me money. It barely did. But because it gave women a place to feel strong. Safe. You miss it. Every single day. Do you think you'll open it again someday? She paused. Then looked at him. I don't plan that far anymore. Julian leaned forward. Maybe you should. She scoffed. With what? Hope. With belief. In what? In yourself. She looked away. Don't start sounding like a quote from a greeting card. He smiled. Sorry. She smiled back. It's okay. I've just heard a lot of pretty words from people who walk away the moment things get hard. I'm not going anywhere. She studied his face. You don't even know me. I know enough. Do you? You deliver more than packages. You carry pain, but you still show up. That tells me a lot. She looked down, her voice low. You're not scared of me? Should I be? Most people are. They see my arms, my shoulders. They think I'm a man, or a threat, or something broken. I see strength. I see someone I want to talk to. Raina's eyes softened. No one had said that to her before. Not like that. Not without asking for something in return. They talked for hours. About small things. About big things. About music. Raina liked loud drums. Julian preferred jazz. About food. Raina hated sweet breakfasts. Julian thought pancakes were perfect. About books. Raina never had time to read. Julian offered to lend her one. They laughed at parts. Fell quiet at others. But they never looked at their phones. They didn't need to. Something was happening. Something neither of them could explain, but both of them felt. It was past midnight when Raina stood up. I should go, she said. Julian nodded, but didn't hide his disappointment. Will you come back? He asked. She shrugged. I don't know. Do you want to? She looked down, then met his eyes. Yes. He smiled. Then I'll wait. Raina took a deep breath. Don't wait too long. I won't. As she turned to walk away, Julian called out again. Raina! She stopped. He reached into the side table and held up a book. Take this. She hesitated, then walked back and took it. She didn't even look at the title. Good night, Julian. Good night, Raina. She stepped outside. The stars were still there, but something inside her had changed. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not judged, not measured, just seen. And as she walked back to her van, clutching the book in one hand, she whispered to herself, don't mess this up. But deep down, she wasn't scared. Not anymore. The next morning came with golden light breaking through the early fog. Julian Kingsley was already awake. He had barely slept. His mind had replayed every second of last night. Raina's voice, her laugh, the way her eyes softened when she talked about her gym. Her quiet strength echoed in his heart long after she'd gone. He sat by the window, dressed in a clean white shirt and soft black pants. The housekeeper brought his tea, but he didn't drink it. His eyes were fixed on the long driveway, even though it was empty. She didn't promise she'd come back, he whispered to himself. But she did say yes. He smiled. Then he frowned. Something was missing. Her ID. He leaned over the side table, where she had placed the book before slipping it into her pocket. But just under where it had been, tucked inside the couch cushion, was a small, worn-out plastic card. He pulled it out and read it. It was Raina's work ID. Cracked edges. Faded print. Her picture was blurry, but her name was clear. Raina M. Ramos. Delivery agent, Route D9. He stared at it for a moment. Then he did something he never did. He left the house. Benedict, his assistant, blinked in shock when Julian rolled into the front courtyard. "Sir, the car is not prepared. I'm not going far." "But," I said, "I'm going." Benedict watched him move toward the garage lift. "Do you need a driver?" "No." Julian pressed the button to lower the custom-built platform that carried his wheelchair into the private vehicle. It had been months since he used it. His hands were steady, his voice calm, but inside he was nervous. He didn't know why he had to see her van. He just knew he needed to. Raina was parked behind an old warehouse at the edge of the city. It was her usual daytime spot on weekends. Quiet, out of sight. No one bothered her there. She sat inside her van, stretching her legs across the back seat, sipping from a plastic water bottle, her hair tied up in a messy bun. The van was old. The paint had peeled in places. The windows were covered with dark cloth from the inside. It was both her home and her hiding place. On the front seat was the book Julian had given her. She hadn't opened it yet. She wasn't ready. A part of her still didn't believe what was happening. That someone like him, someone with a mansion, a name, a whole world of wealth, would talk to someone like her, without shame, without pity. She held the book for a moment, thumb brushing the edges, then set it down again. She needed to sleep, but just as she closed her eyes, she heard it. A car. Slow. Pulling up beside her van. She sat up fast, heart racing. She peeked out through a small gap in the curtain. A black car. Shiny. Clean. Then she saw the back door open, and her heart dropped. Julian. He wheeled himself out of the car gently, adjusting the brakes on his chair. His eyes scanned the area, searching for her van. It didn't take long. There it was. The same one he'd seen her drive away in. Parked beside a dumpster, blending into the background. He stared at it. So this was her home. This was where she slept. Not in a room. Not in a bed. But here. In a space barely longer than a hallway. He didn't knock. He just waited. Inside, Raina's chest was tight. She didn't know what to do. Should she hide? Should she open the door? Should she run? But it was too late. He already knew. And he was still there. Still waiting. Slowly, she unlocked the side door and slid it open. Their eyes met. Julian didn't look shocked. He didn't look sad. He just looked at her. Calm. Like he'd known. "Hey!" he said softly. Raina stepped out, pulling her jacket around her body. "What are you doing here?" He held up the card. "You left this." She looked down at the ID in his hand. "Oh," she muttered. "Thanks." Silence stretched between them. Then she asked, "Did you follow me?" "No." "Then how?" "I asked around. A delivery driver near the Kingsley district gave me a hint." Raina didn't respond. Julian looked at the van again. "You live here?" She crossed her arms. "Yeah." "For how long?" "Over a year." He nodded slowly. "You shouldn't have to." "But I do." He met her eyes. "Let me help." "No." "Raina." I said no. He looked confused. "Why not?" "Because help always comes with a price." "Not from me." "You say that now." I mean it. She stepped back, eyes sharp. Don't you dare try to save me like I'm some broken girl. I'm not your charity case. Julian's voice dropped. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is. He paused. It's not pity. It's not rescue. It's respect. It's care. She stared at him. Why? Because you remind me of myself. She raised an eyebrow. You? Sitting in your mansion with your chef and driver. I was trapped too. Not in a van, but in pain, in silence, in fear. The world kept moving, and I stopped. Raina's eyes softened just a little. I saw you carrying something heavier than any box, he said quietly, and I couldn't ignore it. She looked down. You can't fix me. I don't want to fix you. I just want to walk beside you. Or roll beside you, he added with a small smile. Raina laughed softly. The sound broke the tension. She sat on the edge of the van, elbows on her knees. Julian wheeled closer. I don't know how to let people in, she said. I don't either, he replied. They sat like that for a while. No pressure, no judgment, just presence. Julian looked inside the van. It was clean, organized, but small. A thin blanket, a box of canned food, a pile of folded uniforms. A pair of old gym shoes neatly placed by the back corner. Do you eat enough? He asked. Sometimes. Where do you shower? Gas stations. Gyms. Sometimes nowhere. Where do you park at night? Depends on who's chasing me off. Julian's hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. She noticed. You can't carry this, Julian, she said. I'm not trying to. I had no idea. That's the point, she said. No one ever does. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, would you come back tonight? To the mansion? Yes. Why? I want to show you something. She narrowed her eyes. What? A room. She looked away. I'm not ready for that. It's just a room. With a roof. A hot shower. Clean sheets. I'm still not ready. I'll leave the door unlocked anyway. She looked at him. He smiled again. This time she didn't look away. That night, Raina didn't go back to the gas station. She didn't go to the alley behind the store. She didn't even sleep. She sat in her van parked outside the Kingsley estate, watching the light in the guest house. Waiting. But she didn't go in. Not yet. Julian sat at the window again. He saw the van. He didn't say anything. He just turned off the lamp beside him and whispered into the dark. She's still here. The wind came first. It was soft at the start, just enough to make the trees around the Kingsley estate sway like they were whispering to one another. Raina sat in her van with her hands on the steering wheel, watching the guest house light flicker through the leaves. She hadn't moved all night. Sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Julian's face when he looked inside her van. Not pity, not shock, just quiet understanding. That scared her more than anything. Then the rain started. One drop, then another, then many. Soon, it was pouring so hard the sound on the van roof drowned out every thought in her head. Water slid down the windshield in thick sheets. The wind shook the van from side to side. Raina sat up straight. This is bad, she muttered. She stepped out quickly, pulling her jacket tighter. Water soaked her hair within seconds. She ran to the back of the van to check the old seal she had patched weeks ago. Her heart sank. Water was leaking in, dripping straight onto her folded clothes. No, 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 she whispered, pressing her palm against the wet fabric. The storm grew louder, stronger, like it was angry. Thunder cracked across the sky. Raina slammed the van door shut and leaned against it, breathing hard. Rain soaked her jacket, her boots filled with water. She looked up at the hill, at the mansion, at the guest house light, still on, waiting. Her chest felt tight. She remembered Julian's voice, calm, steady. I'll leave the door unlocked anyway. Raina clenched her fists. I can't, she said to herself. I can't walk in there like this. Another thunderclap shook the ground. The van rocked again. Water spilled across the floor near her feet. She stood still for one more second. Then she made a choice. Julian was already awake. He had woken at the first sound of thunder. The storm triggered something in him. The memory of metal twisting, glass breaking, pain rushing in. He rolled closer to the window and looked toward the driveway. His heart dropped. The van lights were on. The rain was pouring harder now, slamming against the ground like it wanted to tear it apart. He picked up his phone and called Benedict. "Bring the car," Julian said. "Now." "What's wrong, sir?" "It's the storm. She's still out there." "I'll alert security." "No. Bring the car." Julian grabbed his jacket and wheeled toward the door. Raina reached the guest house door just as lightning flashed across the sky. She hesitated. Water ran down her face like tears. She lifted her hand and knocked. Once, then twice. The door opened immediately. Julian sat inside, his jacket already on, his eyes wide. "Come in," he said urgently. "Please." She stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't want to. But my van." "It's okay," he said, not waiting for her to finish. "You're here now." He wheeled back as she closed the door behind her. The warmth inside hit her all at once. Heat, light, safety. She stood there, frozen. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. Julian shook his head. "You didn't." Thunder boomed outside. She flinched. Julian noticed. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not." She looked at him, soaked, tired, broken in ways she hadn't allowed herself to notice. "My things are getting wet," she said quietly. Julian pressed a button on the wall. Moments later, Benedict rushed in. "Sir, get some towels, extra blankets, and send someone to check the van." Benedict looked confused but nodded and hurried away. Raina frowned. "You don't have to do all this." Julian met her eyes. "I do." The storm raged outside. Wind howled like something alive. Inside the guest house, Raina sat on the edge of the couch, wrapped in a thick towel. Her clothes had been replaced with a loose gray sweater and soft pants that didn't cling to her skin. She kept her boots by the door, just in case. Julian sat across from her, a cup of warm tea in his hands. "Drink," he said softly. She hesitated, then took a sip. It burned her tongue, but she welcomed the heat. They listened to the rain pound the roof. Raina broke the silence. "I hate storms." Julian nodded. "Me too." "You?" "Yes." She raised a brow. "You're safe in a mansion." He looked down. "I wasn't always." She leaned back slightly. "Right? The accident." He closed his eyes briefly. "Rain sounds like metal tearing now. I know it's silly." "It's not," she said. He opened his eyes. "You're not laughing." "Why would I?" They sat quietly again. Then Raina whispered, "They chased me off last week." "Who?" "Security guards. Different area. Said I looked suspicious. Said I was ruining the view." Julian's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. It happens. Not here." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "As long as you're here, no one will chase you." She shook her head. "Don't promise things you can't control." "I can control this." Outside, thunder cracked again. Raina hugged the towel tighter around her shoulders. Julian noticed every movement. "How long has it been since you slept in a bed?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "I don't remember." "Tonight," he said, calm but firm. "You sleep here." She stiffened. "I didn't agree to that." "I know. But the storm isn't stopping." As if to prove his point, the lights flickered. Rain hammered the windows. Raina swallowed hard. "Just for the night," she said at last. Julian nodded. "Just the night." Later, Benedict returned with news. "The van won't start, sir. Water got into the engine." Raina's heart dropped. "No," she said, standing up. "No, no, no." Julian wheeled closer. "It can be fixed. That van is my life." "I know. If it's gone." "It's not gone," Julian said firmly. "We'll have it repaired. I promise." She shook her head. "I don't take handouts." "This isn't a handout." This is help. The same way you carried desks for people who needed them. Tears burned her eyes. She turned away quickly. Julian's voice softened. You're not alone tonight. She whispered back, I don't know how to be anything else. He didn't push. He just stayed. The storm lasted until morning. When dawn came, the sky was clear again. Fresh, clean. Raina woke in the guest bed, wrapped in thick white sheets. For a split second, she panicked, thinking she had missed work, thinking she had lost everything. Then she heard it. Birds. Soft. Close. She sat up slowly. Sunlight poured through the window. A hot shower waited in the bathroom. Clean towels folded neatly on the chair. Her clothes were drying nearby. She pressed her feet into the soft carpet. Felt wrong. And perfect. At the same time, a knock came at the door. She froze. Then Julian's voice followed. Good morning. She opened the door slowly. He smiled. You slept, he said. Barely. But you rested. She nodded. There's breakfast, he added. Nothing fancy. She hesitated, then stepped aside so he could see her. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. Julian met her eyes. You don't owe me. I know, she replied. That's why this scares me. He smiled gently. It scares me too. They stood there in the morning light, neither of them wanting to move. Not yet. The sun had risen high over the Kingsley estate. But inside the guest house, everything felt quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Raina stood in front of the bathroom mirror, dressed in the soft clothes Julian had given her. Her own uniform was still drying on the chair. She stared at her reflection, unsure of who she saw. The lines on her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the small scar on her chin. Those were all hers. But the room behind her didn't belong. The warmth, the softness, the silence scared her. It felt like she was inside a life that didn't belong to her. A knock came at the door. Raina. Julian's voice was soft. She opened the door halfway. He was waiting with 2 mugs of hot tea. You hungry? He asked. She nodded, taking 1 mug. They sat outside on the patio side by side. Birds hopped near the edge of the table. The grass was still wet from the storm. The sky was wide and clear. I checked on the van, Julian said, sipping from his mug. Mechanic says it'll take a few days. They're replacing the starter. Raina frowned. How much? Don't worry about it. She set her mug down. Julian, I'm not buying your silence, Raina. She looked at him. Then what are you doing? I'm doing what I would have wanted someone to do for me. She leaned back in the chair, silent for a while. Then she said quietly, You can't keep helping me. It's going to mess everything up. He looked confused. Mess up what? This? She said, waving her hand. Whatever this is. Julian's voice stayed calm. It's not charity. It feels like it. It's not. It's me showing up. For what? For you. Raina stood up suddenly. Her voice got sharper. You don't even know me. He nodded. Then tell me. She stared at him, heart racing. I'm not rich. I'm not clean. I've slept on floors. I've eaten spoiled food. I've fought men twice my size for gas money. I don't have a degree. I don't even have a working phone most days. My hands are rough. My back aches every night. I sweat through my shirts. I smell like cheap soap. She stepped closer. This life, your world, has soft carpets and clean glass and people who open gates for you. My world has locks on bathrooms and no one who remembers your name. Julian didn't flinch. He waited, then said gently, I still want to know you. Why? Because you're real. Raina turned away. You say that now. I'll say it again tomorrow. You're just feeling sorry for me. No, he said. I'm feeling something else. She froze. He stood from his wheelchair slowly, using his armrests. He wobbled but stood. She turned in shock. You're standing. He nodded. For the first time in a while. Why now? Because you're worth the effort. Raina's face twisted, and her voice cracked. Stop saying things like that. Why? Because it hurts. Julian stepped closer, still shaky on his feet. What hurts? She looked at him, eyes full of pain. I didn't think anyone would ever say that to me again. He whispered, You deserve to hear it. She covered her mouth with one hand. And for the first time in years, she cried. Julian sat beside her, slowly lowering himself onto the bench. Reina's shoulders shook. She tried to stop, but the tears kept falling. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just sat with her. When she finally found her voice, it came out broken. I used to dream big, you know? I thought I'd open 3 gyms, then 5, then start one for kids. I even had a name picked out, Queen's House. But now, Julian looked at her. But now what? She wiped her face. Now I'm just surviving, day by day, trying not to fall apart. You haven't fallen. I've been close. Julian nodded. Me too. She looked at him. What did you lose in the accident? He didn't blink. My legs, my peace, my confidence, my friends. She whispered. All of them. He nodded. People stop calling when they don't know what to say. That's true. I stopped answering when I didn't know who I was anymore. She asked quietly, And now? I'm trying to remember. She gave a weak smile. Me too. The wind blew gently across the patio. Julian leaned back. Do you want to know the truth? Reina looked at him. He said, I haven't let anyone in this house since the accident. Not like this. Not for long. Why not? Because I was afraid. Of what? Of being seen. She blinked. But everyone sees you. No, he said. They see the billionaire. The broken man in the wheelchair. The name. The money. Not me. She nodded slowly. And me? What do I see? You see someone who still matters. Reina was quiet for a long time. Then she said, You know, I think you're the first person who hasn't looked at me like I'm strange. You're not strange. I'm strong. But that scares people. Not me. I'm loud sometimes. I can be quiet enough for both of us. She chuckled through her tears. I'm messy. I'm broken. They both laughed, then fell into silence again. But this time it was full of peace. That evening, as the sun began to set, Reina helped the housekeeper prepare dinner. She wore a clean apron, her hair tied up neatly. She sliced vegetables while the woman stirred a large pot. Julian watched from the doorway, smiling. He had never seen his kitchen come alive like this. Later, they all ate together, Julian, Reina, Benedict, and the housekeeper, whose name was Maria. They laughed. They talked. They ate slowly, like they didn't want the night to end. After dinner, Julian and Reina walked, or rather rolled and walked, through the garden path behind the mansion. The sky above was clear again. Reina stopped near the small pond and sat on a bench. Julian rolled beside her. She said, I don't know what this is. Me neither. But I don't want to lose it. Then let's not. I don't trust easily. I'm not asking for your trust in one day. She looked at him. So what are you asking for? A chance. She nodded. Then whispered, Okay. But nothing good stays quiet for long. 2 days later, Reina stepped outside the guest house to find a black car parked at the gate. A woman stood there, dressed in a sharp blue suit, holding a tablet. She looked up at Reina. You're Reina Ramos? Yes, Reina said carefully. I'm from the Post. I'm here for a quote. A what? A quote on your relationship with Julian Kingsley. Reina froze. Who told you I was here? The woman tapped her tablet. We have sources. It's a hot story. I'm not part of a story. You are now. She turned to leave, but more voices came from behind the gate. Cameras, people, flashes. Julian came down the path quickly in his chair. He looked furious. Who let them in? He snapped. Benedict ran after him. I'm handling it, sir. Julian reached Reina. I'm so sorry. I don't know how they found out. Reina's face was pale. This is why I didn't want this, she whispered. I'll make it stop. You can't. He reached for her hand. She stepped back. Reina, I need to breathe, she said, and she walked back inside. Alone. That night, Julian sat at the telescope, staring at the sky. But it felt empty. The stars didn't shine the same. Raina stayed in the guest house for 3 more days. She barely left the room. She didn't talk much. She didn't eat much either. She sat by the window and watched the garden like it was her only way out. The moment those reporters had shown up, it felt like everything she feared came true. People knew. The whispers had begun. And Julian was still kind, still gentle, still waiting. But it was too much. She wasn't built for spotlights. She was built for lifting boxes, fighting for tips, and sleeping with her boots on. Now the world was watching. Julian sat across the garden in the main house, reading headlines on his tablet. Mystery woman in billionaire's life? Who is the muscular maid seen with Julian Kingsley? From street to suite. Romance or rescue? He closed the tablet. His jaw clenched. Raina, he whispered. They're twisting it already. He rolled into his office and called Benedict. Get the board on a call, he said. Benedict paused. Sir. Today. All of them. Understood. Julian stared out the window. He had let people control his life once. Not again. That evening, Raina walked slowly down the hall. She found Julian at the piano again, tapping quiet keys but not playing a song. He looked up. Their eyes met. She took a deep breath. I want to go. He nodded slowly. I figured. I need to disappear for a while. He said nothing. She added, It's not you. It's me in the middle of something too big. I know. I can't be a headline. I didn't ask you to be. I don't want to be your story. You're not, he said. You're my beginning. Her eyes filled with tears. That's exactly why I have to go. Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note written in his own handwriting. You saved me, even when you didn't know you did. I will wait, no matter how long. Raina read it twice. Her voice cracked. Why do you care this much? He smiled. Because you never asked me to. The next morning, Raina left before sunrise. No goodbye. No drama. She left the envelope behind, pressed gently against a fresh towel on the bed. Underneath it, a single line. I will come back, but not until I can stand beside you without fear. Julian read it after she was gone. He sat alone for hours. Not broken, just waiting. Weeks passed. The story died down. The cameras left. The gossip moved on. Julian kept going. He stood more. He walked slowly with support. He played music again. And he never stopped leaving the guest house light on. Every single night. Then one morning, Benedict entered Julian's office with wide eyes. Sir, he said, there's something you need to see. Julian looked up. What is it? Benedict smiled. She's back. The jet landed quietly on the private strip in Abuja. The door opened. Out stepped Raina. Clean uniform. Back straighter. Eyes steady. Beside her, 3 young women in workout gear. Muscular. Confident. Smiling. Julian walked toward them. No wheelchair. No cane. Just him. He froze halfway. She smiled. You didn't think I'd come back small, did you? He stared at the girls beside her. They're the first students, she said. I opened the gym last week. Queen's house. He blinked. How? Someone left a ridiculous amount of money in a donation envelope with no name on it, she said. He chuckled. Sounds sneaky. I used every cent. She stepped closer. The students walked ahead, laughing toward the terminal. Now it was just Raina and Julian, face to face. You changed, he said. She nodded. So did you. He smiled. You walked here. She nodded. And you stood waiting. He whispered. Are you still scared? She said. Yes. But you came. Yes. Why? She stepped close enough to touch his chest. Because some things are worth fighting for. He blinked. And you? She asked. Are you still scared? He shook his head. Not anymore. Good. Then she whispered. So, where's that telescope? He laughed. She reached for his hand. He took it. Firm, warm, real. 2 weeks later, in a private garden full of white roses and soft music, Julian stood in front of friends, family, and a few of Raina's students. There was no press, no cameras, just vows. Raina wore a simple white dress that didn't hide her muscles. She held his hand like it was made for hers. He wore a navy suit and smiled like the sun had come home. Julian said, "The first time I saw her, I saw strength." Raina said, "The first time I saw him, I saw a man who wanted to be real." They kissed. Everyone clapped. Someone cried. Later that night, they sat under the stars on the roof of the guest house. The telescope pointed at the sky. Raina leaned against his shoulder. Julian looked up. "Still remember the 7 sisters?" he asked. She smiled. "They're still shining," she said. He turned to her. "So are you." She turned back. "So are we." Once upon a time, there lived a young nurse named Ruth Daniels. She was just 24 years old, but the tiredness on her face made her look older. Every morning before the sun rose, Ruth would be out of her small, broken apartment and on her way to St. James General Hospital. Her white shoes were worn out, the soles almost gone, and her uniform had been washed so many times the color was fading. But Ruth never complained. She had no time for fancy things. Her only family was her younger brother, Michael, who had a rare condition that kept him in and out of the hospital. Their parents had died years ago in a car accident, and since then, Ruth had become mother, sister, and father all in one. She worked 2 jobs just to afford Michael's medicine. She took the night shifts no one wanted, cleaned up after patients no one liked, and smiled at everyone even when she had nothing left inside. That morning, Ruth was walking through the hospital hallway with her little notebook in hand. Her brown eyes scanned the patient list for the day. Then she paused. "Room 709, she whispered. "New patient." Nurse Veronica, her coworker, walked by chewing gum loudly. "Oh, that one, Mr. Douglas. Just came in last night. Old man. Super old. Like, mummy old." Ruth raised a brow. "What's wrong with him?" "No idea," Veronica said with a shrug. "He doesn't talk. Doesn't blink much either. Creepy. I gave him breakfast and he just stared at the wall. Didn't touch the food." Ruth nodded and walked off. She didn't like gossip. Everyone deserved dignity, no matter how sick or strange they were. When she opened the door to room 709, it was quiet. The room smelled like hospital soap and fresh linen. The man in the bed was thin, pale, and silent. He lay with his eyes half open, staring at the ceiling. "Good morning, sir," Ruth said softly, walking in. He didn't move. "I'm Nurse Ruth. I'll be taking care of you today." Still nothing. Ruth wasn't surprised. Many elderly patients were like this. They were tired, scared, or lost in memories. She began her routine, checked his pulse, temperature, cleaned his hands, changed his bedding gently. As she worked, she kept talking. "I have a younger brother. He's sick too. I know hospitals can feel cold sometimes," she said with a small smile. "But I promise to make this place feel a little warmer for you." She glanced up. The old man blinked. Just once. Ruth didn't make a big deal out of it. She just kept working, humming softly as she moved around the room. When she brought in lunch, he didn't eat, but his eyes followed her. "Just try a little," she said, holding the spoon gently. His lips moved slightly, but no words came out. She sat beside him. "It's okay. We'll take it slow. One day at a time." By the end of the shift, Ruth was exhausted. Her back ached. Her eyes were heavy. But before she left, she came back to room 709 one more time. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Douglas," she said. This time his lips moved again, very slowly. "Thank you." Ruth froze. Her heart beat a little faster. She looked at him. His face was still expressionless, but his eyes were on her. She smiled. "You're welcome." When she got home, Michael was coughing again. She rushed to his side, gave him his medicine, and held him close. "I'm okay," he whispered. "You don't have to pretend for me," she said. I just want you to get better. That night Ruth couldn't sleep. Her mind kept going back to that tiny whisper from the old man. Thank you. She had no idea her life was about to change forever. The next morning, when Ruth arrived at the hospital, something was off. A security guard was waiting at the entrance of the nurse station. Are you Nurse Ruth Daniels? He asked. She nodded slowly. You're needed in the director's office. Immediately, Ruth's stomach dropped. Why? I don't know. Orders came from upstairs. She glanced at Veronica, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. Ruth walked down the hall, heart pounding, thoughts racing. Had she done something wrong? Had Mr. Douglas complained? The director's office was on the top floor. Big glass windows, fancy chairs. It always made Ruth nervous. She had never been called there before. When she entered, the director, Dr. Keene, was sitting behind the desk. A man in a black suit stood beside him. The air felt heavy. Sit down, Ruth, Dr. Keene said. She sat. Dr. Keene leaned forward. You've been assigned to Mr. Douglas in room 709. Correct. Yes, sir. The man in the suit spoke. Mr. Douglas has taken a liking to you. Ruth blinked. I don't understand. The man placed a folder on the table. He has made a request. A legal one. Dr. Keene sighed and said, Mr. Douglas wants to marry you. Silence. Ruth stared at them. Excuse me? You heard me, the man said flatly. He wants you to become his wife. Immediately, Ruth stood up. That's not funny. No one's laughing, Dr. Keene said. This is serious. Ruth shook her head. I'm not marrying anyone, especially not a 90-year-old patient. The man in the suit opened the folder. Inside were forms, legal documents, a marriage certificate. Signed. Why me? Ruth asked, her voice shaking. The man looked her in the eye. He says he sees something in you. Kindness. Loyalty. He insists on you or he will stop all treatment. He is very powerful. Ruth's knees felt weak. She looked at Dr. Keene for help. Dr. Keene spoke slowly. You're behind on your brother's bills. Your rent is due. Your hours here can be cut. Unless I say yes? Ruth whispered. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. She walked out of the office in a daze. Her world was spinning. That night, she sat beside Michael's bed. He was sleeping. A photo of their parents lay beside the lamp. She picked it up and whispered, What would you do, Mama? Papa? I don't want to do this. But I'm so tired. So tired of fighting. The next morning, Ruth walked into room 709. Mr. Douglas looked at her. She sat down beside him. If I say yes, she whispered, you have to promise not to hurt me, or my brother, ever. The old man nodded once. Her hands shook. Then I'll do it. He closed his eyes. For the first time, a tear rolled down his cheek. And so it began. Everything changed for Ruth the day she said yes. Her fingers trembled as she stepped out of Mr. Douglas's room. Her feet felt like they were walking through water. The hallway looked longer than usual. The walls felt tighter. She held her notebook to her chest like a shield. Veronica spotted her and waved. Hey, Ruth, did the mummy talk again? Ruth forced a smile. He said thank you. Veronica laughed like it was a joke. Ruth didn't laugh back. By the time she reached the nurse's station, her name was already being paged over the intercom. Nurse Ruth Daniels. Report to the legal office on the 4th floor. She didn't even have time to blink. Everything was moving too fast. She took the elevator alone. Her eyes stared at the numbers going up. 2, 3, 4. But her mind was stuck downstairs with her brother, with the words she had whispered to Mr. Douglas. If I say yes, you have to promise not to hurt me or my brother. When she stepped into the legal office, the same man in the black suit was already waiting. His name tag now visible, Mr. Holloway, Hospital Legal Advisor. Miss Daniels, he said, standing as she entered. Please sit. She sat, but barely. Her knees were weak. Mr. Holloway opened a new folder on the table. Inside were more documents. We'll need your signature here, he said, pointing. Ruth looked down. What is all this? Marriage agreement, legal rights, privacy clauses. You will be Mrs. Ruth Douglas before the end of the week. The end of the week? She gasped. That soon? He didn't blink. Mr. Douglas's condition is delicate. He wants this handled quickly. She stared at the stack of papers. Do I get time to think? She asked. You've already agreed verbally, Holloway said, calm as ever. Now it's just paperwork. Ruth looked away. Her eyes burned. And what happens after? You will no longer be his nurse. You will become his wife. You'll be moved into his care wing. You'll no longer work with patients. Ruth looked up sharply. You're taking away my job? No. We're offering you something better, Holloway said. You'll be financially secure. Your brother's bills will be taken care of. You'll live under Mr. Douglas's roof. That's part of the arrangement. Ruth's heart beat faster. So I have to live with him? Yes. What if I want to leave later? He paused. Then everything ends. Support, housing, everything. The marriage is key. Ruth stood up. So I'm a prisoner. No, Holloway replied coldly. You're a bride. She felt like throwing up. Later that night, she sat at her small kitchen table while Michael slept in the bedroom. She looked at the documents again. Her hands hovered over them. Her name was printed at the bottom. All it needed was ink. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Dr. Keene. Just sign it, Ruth. You'll never have to struggle again. She stared at the message. Then at the bills scattered across the table. Hospital invoices. Pharmacy receipts. Final warnings from the landlord. She picked up the pen. Her fingers shook. Then she signed. One stroke at a time. And just like that, her life was no longer her own. The next day, everything moved faster. Her shift was reassigned. She no longer had patience. No charts. No duties. Just whispers behind her back. She's marrying him? That old man. She must be crazy or broke. She walked past them without a word. Every word burned in her ears, but she kept walking. When she stepped into room 709, it was empty. The bed was gone. A folded note sat on the table. He's being moved. You will see him again on your wedding day. Ruth sat down in the chair beside the empty space. She didn't know whether to cry or run. By Friday, the day had come. She stood in the hospital chapel, wearing a plain white gown borrowed from a nurse who once had a church wedding. It was too loose at the shoulders, too long at the bottom. But Ruth didn't care. The chapel was mostly empty. A few hospital staff sat in the back, whispering. A priest stood at the front with a Bible in hand. Then the doors opened. Two men wheeled in Mr. Douglas. He was dressed in a gray suit, clean and sharp. His white hair had been combed. His eyes looked straight at her. Ruth's heart skipped. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. But something in his eyes wasn't cold. It was sad. Like he knew this wasn't normal either. The priest began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Ruth's ears faded out. Her hands trembled as she held the old man's cold fingers. She repeated the vows when they told her to. I do. The ring was small, gold, light. It slipped onto her finger like it belonged there. You may kiss the bride. Everyone froze, but the priest didn't push. He simply nodded. You are now husband and wife. There was no applause, just silence, the kind that filled up her chest like heavy smoke. That night, she was moved into a different part of the hospital. A hidden wing, clean, modern, and almost too quiet. The walls were painted cream. The floor was marble. Welcome, Mrs. Douglas, a tall nurse said with a stiff smile. Ruth said nothing. Her room was large, bigger than her entire apartment. There was a soft bed, a couch, and a desk. On the dresser, fresh flowers sat in a white vase. There was also a door. It led to the adjoining room where Mr. Douglas now lived. She didn't open it. She just stared at it for a long time. Then she lay down and closed her eyes. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't sad, but because she had no more tears left. The next morning, A knock came at the door. It was soft, slow. Ruth opened it. It was Mr. Douglas. Not in a wheelchair. Not being pushed. He stood, slowly, carefully, holding the frame of the doorway. Ruth gasped. "You're walking." He nodded once. His voice came out dry, quiet. "Only for today." She stepped back. "Do you want to come in?" He looked around, then entered. Every step he took seemed like it cost him something. He sat in the chair near the window. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. Ruth swallowed hard. "For what?" "For giving up your freedom. For someone like me." She didn't know what to say. "I'm not what I used to be," he said, staring out the window. "But I'm still watching, listening. I saw how you treated me when I was silent. You didn't treat me like a burden. That matters." Ruth sat across from him. "But why marry me?" He turned to her. "Because I needed to know if someone like you still existed. Someone who gives without asking. Who cares without pretending." Her eyes softened. "I did it for my brother." "I know," he said. "That's why it means even more." They sat in silence. For the first time, it didn't feel awkward. After a while, he stood again. "Rest well, Ruth. You've entered a world you don't understand yet." She blinked. "What does that mean?" He looked over his shoulder. "You'll see." Then he walked out, slowly, one step at a time. Ruth stared at the closed door. Her ring felt heavier now. Not because it was gold, but because it was real. Too real. And she had no idea what was waiting on the other side of it. Ruth didn't tell anyone she was leaving. The hospital packed her things quietly. The paperwork was signed in the back office. No one clapped. No one congratulated her. When she walked out of the building, there was no car with flowers. No cheering. Just a black van with tinted windows. The man in the black suit, Mr. Holloway, stood beside the vehicle. "Are you ready, Mrs. Douglas?" he asked, opening the door for her. Ruth paused. That name still didn't feel real. She nodded once and stepped inside. As the van pulled away from the hospital, she looked back just once. It had been her second home, the place where she had cried, laughed, worked, and grown strong. Now it felt like a past life. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A message from the hospital director. "You've made the right choice. Your brother's treatment is fully covered." She read it, then turned off the phone. She didn't want anyone to contact her anymore. This wasn't a normal life anymore. The drive was quiet. The driver didn't speak. Mr. Holloway just stared out the window. Ruth looked out too. They passed through the city, then past the edges of town, until the buildings turned into trees and the roads became quiet. The sky was gray. The air was heavy. She didn't know where they were going. "Where does he live?" she asked softly. Mr. Holloway replied without looking at her. "The Douglas estate. It's private." She leaned back. "I don't know anything about him." "You'll learn." That was the only answer she got. When the gates opened, Ruth's breath caught. The mansion stood tall on a hill, with old stones, long windows, and wide doors. It looked like something from a storybook, but with no magic. Felt silent, lonely, too clean. The front door opened as the van stopped. For staff members stood in a line. A woman in black, a butler in a gray vest, a maid with sharp eyes, and a man with a cane. No one smiled. Mr. Holloway stepped out first. Then Ruth. Her white sneakers touched the driveway. Her plain dress fluttered in the breeze. "This way," the maid said quickly, without waiting for a reply. Ruth followed. As they stepped through the front door, cold air touched her skin. The walls were lined with paintings. Everything smelled like lemon and dust. "You'll stay in the East Wing," the maid said. "Where is he?" Ruth asked. "In his study," the maid replied. "He prefers to be alone." The hallway stretched long. Too long. Ruth didn't see any pictures of family. No signs of laughter. Just polished wood and silence. When they reached her room, the door opened to something that looked like a hotel suite. Big bed. Fireplace. A table set with food no one had touched. The maid pointed to the far door. "His room is next door. You may knock, but don't expect him to answer. Ruth looked at the door. It was thick, quiet. What happens now? She asked. The maid didn't reply. She walked away and closed the door behind her. That night, Ruth sat alone in her new room. She didn't eat the food. She didn't change clothes. She just sat on the bed, staring at her ring. It still felt like it didn't belong on her hand. Her eyes moved to the other door again. She stood up slowly, walked over, knocked. No sound. She knocked again. "Mr. Douglas?" she whispered. Still nothing. She turned the knob. Locked. She pressed her forehead to the wood. "Are you okay?" No reply. She stayed there for a minute longer, then walked back to bed. She lay down and turned away from the door. Her pillow was soft, but her heart was heavy. She didn't cry, but her chest ached in silence. The next morning, Ruth woke up to a knock at her door. She opened it slowly. It was the butler. "Breakfast is served in the green room," he said. She nodded. He didn't wait. He walked off. Ruth changed into a simple blouse and pants. Her shoes still made small squeaks on the marble floor as she followed the hallway. The house felt like it watched her. Every painting, every creak in the wood. When she reached the green room, it was beautiful. Sunlight poured through tall windows. The table was long, covered in white cloth, full of silver trays and fresh fruit. But only one chair was taken. Mr. Douglas sat at the head of the table. Ruth paused. He was dressed neatly again, pale hands resting on the table, eyes steady on the cup in front of him. She slowly walked over. He looked up. "You came," he said. "I didn't know if I should," she answered. "You're my wife," he said. "You should." His voice was quiet but clearer than before. She sat at the opposite end of the table, far, distant. He waved at the butler. "Bring her plate." The butler moved quickly. They ate in silence. After a while, Ruth looked at him. "Why this house? Why live like this? So hidden?" He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window. "Because peace costs more than money," he said. She didn't understand, but she didn't ask again. After breakfast, she was shown around the house by a younger maid named Clara. "This is the library," Clara said. "This is the music room. This is the west wing. It's locked. No one goes in there." "Why?" Ruth asked. Clara shrugged. "Orders." Every door in the house had a rule. Every hallway had a silence. Even the walls felt like they were keeping secrets. That afternoon, Ruth returned to her room and found a box on her bed. Inside was a dress. Long, soft, gold. A note lay on top. "Wear this for dinner. D." She stared at the dress for a long time. She wasn't used to silk or attention. That evening, she put it on. It clung to her skin differently, like it didn't belong. She walked to the dining room. This time, the lights were lower. Candles flickered. The table was smaller. Only 2 seats. He was already there. She sat. "You look," he paused, "comfortable." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not the word I'd use." He gave the faintest smile. "Do you regret this?" she asked him. He sipped his drink. "Do you?" She didn't answer, but her eyes did. He looked at her gently. "I know I took away your normal life. I didn't want a puppet. I wanted someone real." "Why me?" "Because when I was a ghost, you still saw me." Her throat tightened. She looked away. The food was untouched. But something had changed in the room. He wasn't just the patient anymore. He was a man, watching, thinking. And Ruth knew this story wasn't going to be simple. Not at all. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. She stared at her own eyes. They looked different, older, sharper. She heard a soft knock on the door. She turned. The second door. His side. The knob turned slowly. He stepped into her room, wearing a long robe, leaning on his cane. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight," he said quietly. Ruth froze. He looked at her with no hint of desire, just tiredness, not of the body, but of life. She stepped aside. He walked in, sat on the edge of her bed. "Just let me stay here," he said. She nodded slowly. He lay down, fully dressed, facing the window. She sat beside him on the chair. Neither spoke. But for the first time, they weren't strangers anymore. They were something else. Not husband and wife, not yet. But two people, bound by paper, stuck in silence, sharing the same storm. And neither of them knew where it was going. Not yet. But the storm was moving. And the house, with all its walls and secrets, was ready to show Ruth the truth. One room at a time. Ruth woke up to the sound of soft breathing. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the dim morning light slipping through the curtains. Mr. Douglas was still asleep on the bed beside her, his back to her, his hands folded near his chest. He hadn't moved all night. She sat up, quietly, and watched him for a while. The lines on his face looked softer in the light. His eyes remained closed, peaceful for the first time since they'd met. Something about the way he slept, still and careful, made him look less like a stranger and more like someone human. Fragile even. Ruth got up gently, not wanting to wake him. She walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her like it didn't recognize her. Hair slightly messy, eyes tired, the gold ring still on her finger. It wasn't a dream. None of it was. She was married to a man she barely knew. A man who whispered heavy words. A man who owned a house full of shadows. Later that morning, Ruth stepped into the hallway. The marble floors felt colder than usual. Her soft steps echoed lightly. The house was quiet. Too quiet. As she moved toward the staircase, she saw Clara dusting the railing. "Good morning," Ruth said. Clara looked up and nodded politely. "Good morning, ma'am." Ruth hesitated. "Where is everyone?" "Most staff arrive later in the day. Only a few of us live here full-time." Ruth frowned. "It's such a big house. Doesn't it get lonely?" Clara gave a soft smile. "It's always been like this." As Ruth turned to leave, she noticed something strange. The West Wing hallway, the one Clara said was always locked, was open. Just a crack. "Clara?" Ruth asked, pointing. "Did someone open that?" Clara turned, and her smile dropped. "That wing is off limits. Please stay away from there." "Why?" "Mr. Douglas's orders." Ruth looked at the door again. It didn't look dangerous. It looked like any other hallway. But Clara's tone was sharp. Not rude. Just serious. "All right," Ruth said. "I was just asking." Clara nodded and returned to dusting. Ruth walked away, but her mind stayed near that door. Something about it didn't sit right with her. Later in the afternoon, Ruth walked into the library. It was her favorite room so far. Warm light from tall windows, walls covered with books, and a soft couch in the corner. She ran her fingers across the spines of the books. Some were old, some newer. She pulled out a small brown book with no title and opened it. Inside were handwritten notes. A man's thoughts, scribbled pages about time, money, loss. She turned another page and stopped. There was a sketch of her. She froze. It was rough, like it had been drawn fast, but it was clearly her face, her eyes, her shape. Underneath it, in faded pencil, were the words, "The only one who didn't flinch." Ruth shut the book. Her chest tightened. She turned toward the door. He was standing there, Mr. Douglas, watching. She held the book tighter. "You drew this?" He nodded once. "I didn't know you could draw." "I don't. Not well. Just enough." She stepped closer. "Why me?" He looked down. "Because you didn't look at me like I was already dead." Ruth didn't speak. She didn't need to. They sat on the couch. Not close. Just beside each other. "You can ask me anything," he said suddenly. She looked at him. "Anything?" He nodded. "Why don't you talk more?" He chuckled softly. "Because most people don't listen." "I do," she said. "I know. That's why you're here." She looked down at her hands. "Why is this house so strange? It keeps secrets. Like me. That West Wing." He didn't let her finish. "It's not ready to be opened," he said firmly. Ruth nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to pry," she whispered. I just want to understand what I've walked into. He turned to her, his eyes more awake than she'd seen before. You've walked into a place built on silence. But you bring noise. Soft noise. Kind noise. It scares this house. Ruth blinked. Then why keep me here? Because the silence needs to end. That night Ruth couldn't sleep. She paced her room, then sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the second door again. His door. She stood, walked over, turned the knob, unlocked. She peeked in. He was awake, sitting near the window in his robe, looking out. You don't sleep much, do you? She asked. Not since I lost my reason to. She stepped inside. And now? He looked at her. Maybe it's coming back. She sat on the edge of his bed. Can I ask one more question? He nodded. Do you regret marrying me? He didn't answer quickly. Then finally, no. She stared at him. I regret waiting so long to find someone like you, he added. Ruth's throat felt tight. I don't know what to do with all of this, she whispered. The house, the silence, the way the staff look at you. He turned his head. How do they look at me? Like you're not just an old man. Like you're something more. He smiled faintly. That's because I was. Once. Was? He looked away again. You'll see. The next morning, Ruth woke up to noise. Clanging. Shouting. Something loud down the hall. She rushed out, still in her robe. Staff were running toward the west wing. She followed, heart racing. What's going on? She called. No one answered. She stopped near the open hallway, the forbidden one. Inside, two men in suits were arguing with Mr. Holloway. I said not today, Holloway barked. We have a right to see him. He's not dead. You were told to stay away. Ruth stepped forward. What's happening? Everyone went silent. The two men turned. One of them narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Holloway stepped in. She's his wife. Their jaws dropped. Wife? The taller man shouted. That's impossible. Mr. Douglas stepped into the hall, cane in hand. His face was calm. It's not impossible. It's done. The two men turned red. This is a trick, one spat. You're hiding the truth. I'm hiding nothing, Douglas said. Leave. Now. They didn't move. Ruth stepped beside him. She's not part of this, the shorter man yelled. She's the only part that matters, Douglas said quietly. Silence fell. Then, slowly, the two men walked away, their faces hard. When the doors closed behind them, Ruth turned to Douglas. Who were they? He looked at her. Old enemies. Ghosts. People who want what's not theirs. She stared at him. You're more than who you say you are. He didn't deny it. I'll tell you everything, he said. But not yet. She nodded. Her hand brushed against his. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. Whatever this was, it was no longer just paper. It was becoming something real. And real things always come with truths, even ones buried behind locked doors. Ruth could not stop thinking about the men who came to the mansion. All night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Mr. Douglas had gone back to his room quietly. He didn't say a word after they argued with Holloway. He didn't even look at her when he left. The silence was thicker than before. He was hiding something. Something big. Something heavy. And now she knew it wasn't just about health or old age. It was something deeper. Something dangerous. She turned to her side and closed her eyes, but her mind kept running. Who were those men? Why did they call him a liar? Why were they shocked she was his wife? Why did they say he's not dead? None of it made sense. By early morning, she felt even more tired than the night before. A soft knock sounded on her door. She sat up quickly. Come in, she said quietly. Clara stepped inside carrying a tray of breakfast. She placed it on the table near the window, but her hands were shaking slightly. Ruth noticed. Are you all right? Clara hesitated, then nodded too fast. Yes, ma'am. You don't look all right, Clara whispered. The house feels tense. Ruth frowned. Because of what happened yesterday? Clara looked at the closed door of the West Wing, then back at Ruth. They shouldn't have come. They bring trouble. Ruth stepped closer. Who are they? Clara's lips trembled. I can't say. You can, Ruth said gently. I won't tell anyone. Clara swallowed hard. They claim to be family. Ruth froze. Family? But Mr. Douglas always said he had no one left. No children. No brothers. No sisters. No, Ruth whispered. He told me he doesn't have family. Clara shook her head slowly. Everyone in this house knows the truth but follows his orders. Those men come once every few months. They always demand access to him. They always say they deserve something. They always walk out angry. Ruth's heart thumped loudly. So he lied to me? Clara looked down. You didn't hear that from me. Then she walked out quickly before Ruth could ask more. Ruth stood still for a moment, the tray untouched. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was confused. Why lie about family? Why hide from them? Why make everyone pretend they don't exist? Ruth stepped into the hallway and made her way to the main staircase. She needed answers. She needed to talk to someone honest. She found the butler in the dining room polishing silver spoons. Mr. Henry, Ruth said softly. He turned. Good morning, Mrs. Douglas. Can I ask you something? He paused, then nodded. Yes. You've known Mr. Douglas for a long time? 32 years, he said. Ruth blinked. That long? Yes, ma'am. She stepped closer. Those men from yesterday? Who are they truly? His jaw tightened. He took a deep breath. I cannot speak on that. Please, Ruth whispered. I'm his wife. I deserve to know something. He put down the spoon. Mrs. Douglas. This house is built on secrets. Every wall has heard something it cannot repeat. That's not an answer, Ruth said. He met her eyes. Because the truth is not mine to give. Ruth felt a mix of frustration and fear growing inside her. Fine, she said quietly. Then I'll ask him myself. She rushed up the stairs to Mr. Douglas's room. She knocked hard. Mr. Douglas? She called. No answer. Please open the door. We need to talk. Silence. Ruth's heart pounded. She tried the handle. Unlocked. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The window was partly open. The air inside felt cold, as if he had left hours ago. She walked around slowly. Mr. Douglas? She whispered again. Nothing. Then she noticed something on the nightstand. A small black phone. Not a smartphone, just a simple button phone. The screen was lit. Call had just ended. Ruth picked it up, staring at the screen. A number was displayed, but no name. Before she could think further, the phone started ringing again. She gasped and almost dropped it. She looked at the door, then at the phone again. Slowly, she answered. Hello? She said softly. A deep voice replied on the other end. So, you're the girl. Ruth's hand shook. Who is this? You don't need to know my name, the man said. What you need to know is that your husband is lying to you. Her throat burned. Why would he lie? Because he's afraid. Afraid of what? The man chuckled darkly. Afraid of us. Ruth stepped back. Why? What do you people want? He spoke slowly, calmly. We want what belongs to us. Ruth held the phone tighter. I don't understand. You will, he said. Soon. Very soon. Then the line went dead. Ruth stood frozen. Her hands were cold. Her feet felt like they weren't touching the floor. She placed the phone down slowly. The room felt even colder now. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She walked toward the window and looked outside. The front gate, usually guarded by one man, now had 4 guards standing with stern faces. The garden, normally empty, had staff walking in pairs as though waiting for something. Something big. Something dangerous. Ruth left the room and headed straight to the study, the one room he always kept closed. She reached the door. It was locked. She knocked hard. Mr. Douglas, open this door. No answer. She knocked harder. I talked to someone on your phone. They said you're lying. They said you're afraid of them. Please tell me what's going on. Still nothing. Her chest tightened. She rested her forehead against the door. I don't like secrets. I don't like being left in the dark. I just want to understand. The door clicked. It opened slightly. Mr. Douglas stood there in his long dark robe, staring at her. His eyes looked older, sadder, more tired than she had ever seen. Come inside, he said quietly. She stepped in. The room was dark, lit only by a small lamp. Papers were scattered on the desk. Old photographs filled the shelves. Newspaper articles lay open. Ruth slowly walked toward them. Her eyes scanned the headlines. Douglas Tech founder disappears. Billionaire gone. Family fights for control. Chairman's secret empire in question. She gasped and covered her mouth. Her hands shook. She turned to him slowly. You were a tech billionaire? He nodded once. And you disappeared? Yes. She pointed at the papers. Why? Why would you vanish like that? Why lie to everyone? Why hide? He sat down slowly, gripping his cane. Because the people closest to me tried to destroy me. Ruth's heart dropped. He continued, voice low but sharp. They wanted my company, my money, my power. They thought I wouldn't fight back if I disappeared. Ruth whispered, the men from yesterday? He nodded. They claimed to be your family. They are, he said. But they stopped being family the day they tried to end me. Ruth sat beside him, her breathing shaky. And you've been hiding ever since? Yes. She swallowed hard. Why bring me here? Why marry me? Why pull me into this? He looked at her with eyes full of truth now. Because the only people who survive in a world like mine are people who don't want anything from it. Ruth stared at him. Slowly, she whispered, do they know you're still alive? They suspect it, he said. But they need proof. She remembered the phone call. They said they're coming back. He nodded. Which means we don't have much time. Much time for what? She asked. He looked at her, face hard as stone. For the truth you deserve. She stared back at him, fear crawling slowly up her spine. She finally understood. Her quiet marriage was not quiet at all. Her new life was sitting on a storm, and the storm was coming fast. Whatever truth he was hiding, it wasn't just big. It was dangerous, and now she was part of it. She couldn't escape even if she wanted to. Ruth sat frozen in the study, staring at the papers, her fingers clenched around the edge of the desk. The truth was finally in front of her. Her husband wasn't just a sick old man hiding in a mansion. He was a billionaire who had vanished on purpose. Mr. Douglas sat quietly beside her, his hands folded over his cane, eyes watching the window like he didn't want to see the hurt on her face. She turned to him slowly. Her voice came out soft, but her words were sharp. You lied to me. He nodded once. I did. You said you had no one. You said you were just an old man who wanted peace. I am old, he said, and I do want peace, but I also wanted protection. Protection from your own family? She asked. He looked at her now. Yes. Ruth stood and paced slowly across the study floor. I don't understand. You were rich, powerful. Why fake your death? Why disappear? He leaned back slightly. Because I trusted the wrong people. She paused. What happened? Mr. Douglas took a deep breath. His voice was slower now but steady. 10 years ago, I built a company that changed the world. Douglas Tech. We designed smart systems, built machines, created security networks for banks, hospitals, even governments. Ruth nodded slowly. That's why everyone called you the Ghost Tech King. I never liked the spotlight, he continued. So I worked quietly. My name was small, but the company was big. I made billions, Ruth. But I didn't share that power with just anyone. I had partners, family members, nephews, nieces, even an adopted son. I trusted them. I brought them in. He stared straight ahead. But the money changed them. They didn't want to wait. They didn't want to build. They wanted control. Ruth walked back to the desk and sat again, listening closely. They set me up, he said. One day, I was on a flight to attend a board meeting. The jet had a sudden malfunction, but I was not on it. I had sent someone else in my place at the last minute. Her eyes widened. The crash. He nodded. The jet exploded. Everyone thought I was dead. She covered her mouth with her hand. They announced my death the next day. My partners mourned me on the news. My family cried in front of cameras. But within 48 hours, they began moving my shares, breaking contracts, and stealing what I had built. Ruth whispered, "They planned the crash?" "I believe they did," he said. "But I have no proof. All I had was a second chance. I took it. I vanished." She looked at the walls of the study again, the books, the files, the layers of secrets. "All these years," she said, "you stayed hidden in this house." "I've moved from place to place," he said. "But this house is where I started rebuilding." "Rebuilding what?" "My plan," he said quietly. Ruth leaned forward. "And where do I fit into this?" He looked at her with softer eyes now. "You came into my life by accident. Just a nurse assigned to a dying man. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care about the rumors. You treated me like a person." Ruth shook her head. "I was just doing my job." "No," he said. "You were doing more. You spoke gently. You stayed longer. You smiled when you didn't have to. And you never once looked at me like I was a burden." She lowered her eyes. "I started watching you," he continued. "At first just to understand you. But the more I saw, the more I realized you were different. You reminded me of someone." "Who?" she asked. "My late wife." Ruth blinked. "She died young," he said. "Cancer. Before I became rich. She was kind, simple, strong. Just like you. After she passed, I never loved anyone again." He leaned forward now. "But you brought back something I thought I had buried." Ruth felt a tight pull in her chest. "So you decided to marry me?" "Yes," he said, "because I knew my enemies would come back. And I needed someone beside me who wasn't bought. Someone real. Someone who wouldn't betray me." She stood again, this time slower. "You could have told me the truth. I was afraid you'd walk away." "I still might," she said. He didn't flinch. "I wouldn't stop you," he replied. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, she asked, "Why now? Why tell me everything today?" "Because they're coming again," he said. "And they're coming fast. The moment they confirm I'm alive, everything will break open. The media, the courts, the company, my life." Ruth crossed her arms. "And you expect me to help you?" "I expect nothing," he said calmly. "I only hope." She looked at the old man again. No longer just her patient, no longer just her husband, but a man who had carried pain for years behind locked doors and guarded rooms. She sat back down. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to decide," he said. "Decide what?" "If you want to leave, I'll give you enough money to disappear. You'll never struggle again. Your brother will live a better life. I'll protect you from everything." Ruth stared at him. "And if I stay?" He breathed in deeply. "Then we stand together," he said. "We fight this war. We go public. You'll take my name. You'll become part of the company. You'll inherit everything if I fall." Ruth blinked. "You'd give me everything?" "I have no one else I trust." Her hands shook slightly on her lap. "I don't know how to run a company," she said. "I'll teach you," he replied. "Every step, every document, every lie they built, I'll show you how to break it." She looked down at her ring. It had always felt like a mistake. Now it felt like a key, a heavy one. She looked up at him again. "Why do I feel like this is more than business?" He gave a faint smile. "Because it is." Ruth stood again and walked slowly to the window. Outside, the wind shook the trees. The guards were still by the gate. Something in the air felt like it was holding its breath. She turned to him. "I need time to think," she said. "You have it," he replied. "But not too long," she added. He nodded. "Not too long." Later that evening, Ruth walked alone through the garden path behind the mansion. The sky was turning orange. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Ask him about the sealed red room upstairs. She stopped walking. She read the message again. Sealed red room? She turned quickly and looked back at the house. There was still more she didn't know. And now that the door of truth had opened, it was pulling her deeper in. Her steps grew faster. She wasn't afraid anymore. She needed to know everything. And the only way to do that was to keep going. Ruth stood at the edge of the garden, staring up at the mansion windows. The sky had darkened now. Soft wind moved through the trees, but her mind was louder than anything around her. That message on her phone, "Ask him about the sealed red room upstairs," kept repeating in her head. She didn't know who sent it. She didn't know what the red room was, but she knew it was connected to everything Mr. Douglas had just told her. She turned around and walked back inside the house. The halls were quiet. She passed Clara, who gave her a curious look but didn't speak. Ruth's feet moved quickly up the grand staircase. At the top, she looked left toward the west wing. The hallway was dark. Most of the doors were closed, but one was painted differently, deep reddish-brown. She hadn't noticed it before. She walked up to it. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a flat wooden surface, smooth and silent. She placed her palm against it. It was cold. She stood there for a while, unsure what to do, then turned and walked straight to the study. Mr. Douglas was there, sitting in the same chair by the lamp, reading from an old folder. He looked up as she entered. "You're back," he said. She walked to him without sitting down. Her tone was calm, but firm. "What's in the red room?" His face didn't change, but his hands stopped moving. "You weren't supposed to find that yet." "Well, I did," she said. "And someone texted me about it. Someone who knew I didn't." Mr. Douglas closed the folder slowly. "The red room is where everything began to fall apart." "Open it," she said. He didn't move. "Please," she added. "I need to see it." He nodded after a pause and stood up. "Follow me." They walked down the hallway. No words between them. At the red door, he reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a thin card. He slid it across a small groove Ruth hadn't noticed before. A soft click. The door opened inward. She stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old paper. The room was filled with drawings, blueprints, and photographs. Charts on the walls. Dozens of hard drives stacked in boxes. Notes pinned to boards with strings connecting ideas. In the middle stood a long table. On it sat a photo album. Ruth walked to it and opened the first page. It was a picture of Mr. Douglas younger, smiling, standing with a woman who looked warm and gentle. "My wife," he said softly behind her. "Before the cancer." Page by page, she saw the life he had lost. The growth of the company, the birth of the empire, the meetings, the press photos, the sharp rise of everything. Then the shift. Angry emails, newspaper clippings, signed betrayal papers. "That's my adopted son," Mr. Douglas said, pointing to a man in one photo. "He called me father for 10 years, but he was the first to stab me in the back." Ruth closed the album. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry," Mr. Douglas sighed. "This room is my memory. I come here when I want to remember who I was, and who I can never be again." Ruth turned to him. "You're still that man. You're just hidden under too much pain." He looked at her. "You really believe that?" he asked. She nodded. "I do." He stepped closer. "Then help me come back." She looked into his eyes. "How?" "Stand beside me," he said. "Let me teach you. Let me show you the world I built. Not just the one they tried to steal. I need someone strong at my side. Someone who sees me clearly. Someone who doesn't want the money or the name. I only want the truth," she said. "Then we start tomorrow," he replied. "No more secrets." The next morning, Ruth woke up with a new kind of energy in her chest. She dressed quickly and walked to the study. Mr. Douglas was already waiting, a pile of books and papers on the desk. "Today," he said, "we begin with the structure. These are the companies still running under my name from the shadows." He showed her everything. Security firms, data centers, technology patents, Investments in banks and schools and hospitals. I kept them alive, he said. With loyal people. Ruth looked through the files. This is a whole kingdom. A broken one, he replied. But fixable. They spent hours going through numbers, names, signatures, legal traps, threats from his so-called family. Ruth asked questions. He answered every single one. Around noon, she paused and smiled. You're a good teacher, he chuckled. And you're a fast learner. In the afternoon, he brought out a folder labeled Air Protocol. What's this? She asked. He opened it. It's the legal plan for transfer of power. You're listed here now. You're the only name. Her heart skipped. That's a big risk. He nodded. But the right one. Later, they shared tea in the green room. Ruth leaned back and looked at him. You don't seem afraid anymore. I was afraid of dying alone, he said. But not anymore. She smiled. Then the maid Clara entered with a tablet. Sir, she said, looking uneasy. You should see this. Mr. Douglas took the tablet. Ruth walked over and stood behind him. It was a news article. Young nurse secretly marries billionaire tech founder rumored dead, with their wedding photo. Blurry but clear enough. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. How? Mr. Douglas narrowed his eyes. They leaked it. They want attention. They want war. What do we do? Ruth asked. He looked at her. Stand up straight, he said. He tapped the table. Let the world come knocking. By nightfall, more articles flooded the internet. Who is Ruth Daniels? Why did Douglas choose her? Dead or alive? The billionaire mystery deepens. Ruth stood at the window of her room, watching camera flashes spark through the trees beyond the gate. They're here, she said. Mr. Douglas stepped in quietly. Yes, he replied. And now the real battle begins. She turned to face him. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. He smiled. Good. Because I need your help more than ever. Ruth walked toward him. She no longer felt like a nurse. No longer like a lost girl. No longer like a forced bride. She was becoming something else. Someone strong. And in this house full of old secrets and heavy shadows, she was now the light. The front gates were covered with news vans. Large cameras sat on tripods. Reporters held mics, shouting questions over each other. Photographers were standing on ladders trying to get a clear shot into the house. There were whispers everywhere. About the ghost billionaire, about his young wife, about the truth no one expected. Inside the mansion, Ruth stood by the mirror, staring at her reflection. She wore a dark navy suit. Simple, neat, but strong. Her hair was tied back tightly. No makeup, just her bare, serious face. She couldn't believe what was happening. Just a few months ago, she was working late shifts at the hospital, scrubbing wounds, rushing medicine to patients, eating cold food during midnight breaks. Now she was about to stand next to the man the world thought had died. Mr. Douglas stood at the door watching her. You look ready, he said softly. I don't feel ready, she replied. You're more ready than you think. Ruth turned to him. Will this fix things? No, he said. But it will show them the truth. That matters more. She walked toward him slowly. They're going to come after us, she said. The board, the family, the people who wanted you gone. I know, he said. She stared into his eyes. Then we face them together. He gave a small nod. Always. In the grand hall, the mansion staff were busy setting up chairs, lights, and a podium. The room had been silent for years, but now it buzzed with sound. The kind of sound that follows history. Clara stood beside Ruth, holding a folder. This is your speech, she said quietly. I thought Mr. Douglas was speaking, Ruth replied. He will. But they want to hear from you too. Ruth looked at the papers. Her heart started racing. What if I say the wrong thing? Clara smiled. Then you say it with truth. That's what makes it right. Reporters were allowed into the main hall an hour later. More than a dozen media houses showed up. Local news, national news, even international cameras. They whispered and murmured as they saw the setup, unsure if it was real. Then the door opened. Mr. Douglas entered first, walking slowly with his cane. The room fell completely silent. Then Ruth stepped in behind him. Mics clicked. Lights flashed. Every camera pointed forward. Mr. Douglas stopped at the podium. He looked older than ever, but also stronger. He placed his hands on the edge of the stand and began to speak. "I know you're all shocked," he said. "And I know most of you believed I was dead." No one moved. "I let you believe that," he continued, "because my life was in danger, because the people I trusted tried to destroy me, because silence was safer." Ruth stood behind him, listening closely. "But I'm no longer afraid," Mr. Douglas said, "because someone gave me a reason to return." He stepped aside and gestured for Ruth to step forward. She hesitated, then walked to the podium. Her fingers gripped the sides tightly. She looked around the room, at the flashing lights, the staring faces, the judgment in every lens. Then she spoke. "My name is Ruth Daniels," she said. "I'm a nurse. I grew up poor. I worked in hospitals where gloves were reused, where patients shared beds, where I stayed up every night trying to save my younger brother's life." Her voice shook. "But one day I was assigned to care for a patient. Quiet man. Sick. Still. Everyone ignored him. But I didn't." She looked at Mr. Douglas. He wasn't just a patient. He was a person. And what I didn't know was that he was also someone the world had forgotten. On purpose. A few gasps moved through the room. "He trusted me when he didn't trust anyone else," she continued. "He asked me to marry him, and I said yes because I needed help. But somewhere along the way I found more than help. I found truth. I found history. And I found a man who had been broken by people he once called family." She held her head high. "He isn't just my husband. He's my partner. And today, we're here to tell you the truth." Mr. Douglas stepped beside her again. He pulled out a sealed envelope. "These," he said, "are the original documents showing how my shares were stolen. These," he added, lifting another folder, "are the names of the people who planned it." Gasps again. More flashes. The tension in the room thickened. "I'm taking my company back," Mr. Douglas said. Ruth stood beside him as the crowd erupted with questions. "Who are the people involved? Is your adopted son behind this? Did you really fake your death? Is Ruth now your heir?" He raised a hand. "One question," he said. "One answer." A female reporter stood. "Why now? Why speak after all this time?" Mr. Douglas turned to Ruth. "Because I finally have someone to stand beside me." He reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. She held it tightly, and they stood there, together, as the room exploded with more questions. More noise, more flash. But Ruth wasn't afraid anymore. She had walked through fear already, and she had come out stronger. That night, the news went viral. Every channel showed the same headline: "Billionaire returns from the dead with secret wife." Some called it fake. Others called it inspiring. Online articles dug into Ruth's past. Her hospital work. Her brother's illness. Her humble apartment. "She's real," some said. "She's after his money," others argued. But no matter what they said, the world was watching now. And Ruth was no longer invisible. She was the woman beside the man who refused to stay silent. 2 days later, they received court documents. The old board of directors was suing. They wanted to freeze Mr. Douglas' assets. They claimed Ruth manipulated him. They said his mental state was weak. Mr. Douglas handed the papers to her. "Expected this," he said. Ruth read through them slowly. "Do we fight?" she asked. "We stand," he said. The next week was filled with lawyers, cameras, reporters calling, former staff trying to reach them, fake friends reappearing, and even threats sent by email. But Mr. Douglas stayed calm. Ruth never left his side. At night, he taught her the deeper parts of the company. How to sign documents, how to read contracts, how to deal with power. "You'll need this," he said, "sooner than you think." On the 4th night, Ruth got another message from the unknown number. "They're planning to strike from inside." She showed it to Mr. Douglas. He stared at it long. then called Holloway, the legal advisor. "Start auditing every internal account," he said, "especially the ones tied to the company trust." The next day they found it. One of the board members was trying to transfer a massive chunk of shares. He had faked a signature, claimed Mr. Douglas was unwell. They exposed him publicly. The court froze his assets. The tide was turning. On the seventh night, Ruth sat outside with Mr. Douglas under the stars. The garden was quiet. The air was calm. "I never asked for any of this," she said softly. "I know, but I'm not sorry anymore." He smiled at her. "You've become more than I ever expected," he said. She looked at him. "So have you." He held her hand. "What if I don't make it?" he asked. "What if my body gives out before this war is over?" "Then I'll finish it," she replied. He nodded. "You're the daughter I never had." She leaned against his shoulder. "And you're the reason I'll never run again," she said. They sat like that for a long time. The moon watched them quietly. The house, once full of secrets, now stood with its doors open wide. Not everything was fixed. Not everything would be easy. But the world now knew who Mr. Douglas was. And more importantly, they knew who Ruth had become.